My name is Ryan Mercer, and I was born into the kind of wealth that people write bitter songs about. In Crestwood, that made me a particular sort of celebrity, not famous for doing anything, just famous for existing badly. The city's favorite cautionary tale. It was September 19, 2025, and I was on a private beach in Bora Bora doing what I did best, nothing, expensively. Then my brother called. Ryan. Cole's voice was wound so tight it had no give in it at all. Get on a plane. Right now. I didn't open my eyes behind my sunglasses. I told you already. I'm not marrying her. This Iris Calloway woman, I've never even met her. Why would I sign my entire life over to a stranger? Because she's dead. The words fell like stones into still water. It's been 3 days since you left. She was in the house you were supposed to move into, and she's gone, Ryan. And she left a will. Her company. $20 billion. All of it. She left everything to you. The drink slipped from my hand. I didn't notice. What did you do to her? Cole asked, and I had no answer for him. On the jet back to Crestwood, I sat with the word dead and tried to make it mean something. Iris Calloway had been a legend in the city's business world, a self-made force who had appeared from nowhere and rebuilt herself into something untouchable. They called her the Ice Queen. Ruthless, brilliant, undefeated. The idea that a woman like that had quietly unraveled over a man she had never met made no sense. It still made no sense when I pushed open the door to our would-be marital home. Every detail of that penthouse was mine. The rare streetwear in the closet. The collector's figures arranged on custom shelves. The exact model of console I'd been chasing for 2 years. It was as if someone had studied me and then built a home from the research. A terrified housekeeper led me to a locked room near the master bedroom. When the door opened, I understood. Every wall was photographs of me. Years of them. Candid moments, stolen long-range shots, a few taken close enough to suggest she had stood right beside me without my ever knowing. At the center of it all, pressed deep into the dark carpet, was a stain that told me everything I hadn't wanted to know. She said you were the only light she'd ever had, the housekeeper wept. She said she'd loved you for years. She wanted you to have everything. She just hoped you'd remember her. I donated every penny of the inheritance. I had the apartment gutted. But the image of that room followed me into sleep and ambushed me during the day, and slowly, over weeks, I stopped being able to tell where the guilt ended and I began. I started needing pills just to rest. I think I was becoming sick in ways I didn't recognize. Then one morning I woke up, grabbed my phone, and stared at the date on the screen until it stopped making sense. September 16, 2025. The day I had left. 3 days before Iris Calloway died. Sitting on the edge of my bed in my parents' house, with sunlight cutting through the curtains and the smell of cut grass coming through the window, was Leah, my childhood neighbor, someone I had known my entire life, wearing that familiar expression of patient concern. You look terrible, she said. Bad dream. Whatever force had handed me this impossible second chance gave me no instruction manual, no flash of light, no sign. Just the date on a screen and the memory of everything I had failed to prevent. I sat very still for a moment, and then I decided. Leah, I said, I'm getting married. She looked at me as though I'd announced I was joining a traveling circus. She told me exactly what she had told me the first time, that I should disappear for a while, let the whole Iris Calloway situation blow over, protect my freedom. Last time, I had agreed with her. Last time, that agreement had cost a woman her life. I was not going to make the same mistake twice. Calloway Dynamics occupied a glass tower in Crestwood's financial district that seemed designed to make visitors feel slightly inadequate. Sharp angles, polished surfaces, the architectural equivalent of a warning sign. Its owner was exactly the same. Iris Calloway stood with her back to the door when I entered, looking out over the city as if she were quietly deciding its future. When she turned, I felt something stall in my chest. I had seen photographs of her. None of them had adequately communicated the experience of being in the same room. She was extraordinarily beautiful in a way that had nothing soft or inviting about it, pale, precise, composed, with dark eyes that looked at you as though they'd already assessed you and filed their conclusions. "Can I help you?" she said. I figured I should probably meet my fiancé in person, I replied, dropping into the chair across from her desk with the casual arrogance that was my default setting. The word fiancé made something shift almost imperceptibly behind her eyes. We're not married yet. Working on it. So, tell me, why does the great Iris Calloway want to marry someone with my reputation? Charity. Entertainment. Morbid curiosity. She let the silence stretch for long enough that most people would have filled it. Then she said simply, because I want to. 4 words. No elaboration. Total authority. I almost choked. I pushed past the bewilderment and asked her to dinner. She refused. I mentioned that I was canceling plans involving a supermodel and 3 yachts just to be here. The color shifted in her face by exactly 1 shade, and her eyes dropped briefly to the desk. She agreed, but only barely, and only after she gave me her name instead of her title, the first tiny thing she conceded. Dinner was at a quiet French place I knew valued discretion. She arrived before me, had changed into a simple white dress, and looked human enough that her permanent force field of don't approach felt, for a moment, like a choice rather than a condition. The conversation was hard work. She gave me one-word answers and terminal silences. When our steaks arrived, I glanced across the table and found her entirely at war with her cutlery. The focused, stiff-wrist effort she was applying to a medium-rare piece of beef was so earnest and so completely at odds with everything else she projected that I laughed before I could stop myself. Her hand froze. She looked up. The expression on her face, caught, unguarded, braced for humiliation, was the most human thing I had seen her do all evening. I got up, walked around the table, took the knife and fork from her hands, cut her steak without comment, and went back to my seat. She watched me the whole time, saying nothing. Eventually she picked up her fork and ate. You're nervous, I said. I'm not. Your left hand is shaking. A pause. I watched her right hand curl tightly against the fabric of her lap. Then I caught the glimmer of something dark between her fingers and my stomach dropped. I reached across, took her hand, and turned it over. 4 crescent-shaped wounds in her palm, still fresh. What is this? I said quietly. She flinched and tried to pull away. I held on. Iris. I kept my voice low, pressing my handkerchief against her palm. Is this what you do when you don't know what else to do with what you're feeling? She wouldn't look at me. Her jaw was tight. The tears she was refusing were obvious in the way her eyes had gone glassy and still. It needs to stop, I said. Not just tonight. All of it. I didn't threaten. I just looked at her until she felt it. I mean that. She gave the smallest, most reluctant nod I had ever received. And somehow, it was enough to get us through the rest of dinner. After that, I made myself a fixture she couldn't remove. Lunch every day, no excuses accepted. Take-out containers on her desk, a standing army of flower deliveries to the office. Marcus, her assistant, progressed in about a week from watching me arrive with professional suspicion to watching me arrive with barely concealed pity, for which of us, I was never entirely sure. She stopped telling me to leave. She started eating the food I brought. On Tuesday of the second week, she asked, without any preamble, whether I preferred the new bistro or the noodle place 3 blocks over, then texted the order ahead before I answered. That was the day I understood that Iris Calloway expressed care by removing obstacles, not by saying words. She just needed someone to notice. But she was still watching me in ways I wasn't supposed to catch. I noticed it first at a lunch where I'd exchanged a few easy, laughing words with the restaurant manager on the way in. Nothing, old acquaintances, 30 seconds. When I sat down, Iris was looking at her water glass with an expression I couldn't immediately name. Controlled. Carved out of her own face. It lasted only a second before she returned to normal, but I filed it away. Then came the afternoon when Leah called. I was in Iris's office. Iris was at her desk pretending to read something, which she did convincingly except for the occasional glance at her empty coffee cup. I picked up the call in front of her because I had nothing to hide. Leah wanted me for a dinner at her family's house. I told her I was busy. She pushed. I told her clearly that I was getting married and my priorities had changed, and ended the call. Iris said nothing. She was very still. Too still, the way a room goes quiet right before the weather changes. I noticed her grip on her pen, the way her gaze had gone somewhere private and cold. I recognized the look from that moment in the restaurant, just bigger now, held in longer. She's a childhood friend, I offered. That's all it's ever been. Iris set her pen down with great precision. She opened a drawer. She placed a stack of photographs on the desk between us and then stepped back. I looked down. Every image was of me with a different woman, parties, events, candid moments the press had caught. There were a lot of them. She had collected them all. I know what you are, she said. Her voice was quiet, which was worse than if she had shouted. I've always known. I was just hopeful enough to believe it wouldn't matter. A short, hollow laugh. Were you gentle with all of them? Did you take care of all of them the way you've been taking care of me? The mask had finally slipped, and underneath it was not rage but grief, years of it, patient and enormous, dressed up in anger because anger was easier to stand in. She looked like someone who had decided long ago that she would never deserve the thing she wanted most and had simply been waiting to be proven right. I stood up and put my arms around her. She went rigid immediately, hands flat at her sides, body locked against the contact. But I held on and spoke close to her ear, quietly enough that it was only for her. None of that matters now. Everything before this, it's done. What I need you to hear is this: you're not going to carry those pictures around anymore. You're not going to let your imagination do what your mother apparently spent years doing to you. And you are absolutely not going to turn on yourself when things get hard. I felt, very gradually, the tension begin to leave her. I'm not going anywhere. But you have to let me in. A single tear hit my shoulder. Then another. She didn't move her arms. She just stood there and cried against my shoulder with the specific devastation of someone who had been holding everything in for so long that even the release hurt. I kept a hand moving slowly across her back and said nothing more. Sometimes there was nothing more to say. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were swollen and she looked both wrecked and lighter. We gathered the photographs together from the floor. When our hands met at the last one, I laced my fingers through hers and held on. Let's actually do this, I said. Not an arrangement. Not a negotiation. You and me, from the beginning, properly. She looked at me for a long time. Then her fingers tightened around mine. 2 weeks later, on a Friday night, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. She stood in the doorway looking uncertain, which on Iris meant a very subtle arrangement of tension around her eyes and a slight delay before speaking. She said she'd been passing by. She had not been passing by. I moved aside and let her in. She perched on the edge of my couch while I sat on the floor in front of the television, halfway through a game. After about 10 minutes of watching in silence, she asked what the objective was. I told her. Another 5 minutes passed and she asked why the character was running in that direction. I explained. By the end of the hour she was sitting on the floor beside me, and when I handed her the second controller and walked her through the basics, she learned faster than I expected and got quietly, visibly pleased with herself in a way she didn't seem to notice she was showing. At one point I got her through a difficult section and she made a small, involuntary sound of triumph that turned into the most genuine laugh I had ever heard from her, surprised out of her before she could decide whether to permit it. She went quiet after, like she'd embarrassed herself. I didn't make anything of it. I just suggested we order something to eat, and she picked up the controller again. That was the night I stopped wondering whether this was salvageable and started knowing it already was. The first real fight came on a Tuesday. I'd had a last-minute situation with something for my father's company, a meeting that ran until 9 at night, my phone dead for most of it. When I arrived at the apartment we'd agreed to meet at, Iris was there but she wasn't talking. She answered my explanation with single syllables and occupied herself very carefully with things that didn't need her attention. Are you angry? I asked. No. Iris. I said no. I sat down across from her. When I'm late without warning, what do you do for those hours? A long silence. She looked at her hands. I assume something happened. That you're not coming. That I chose not to come. That something happened to you. Her voice had gone small in a way it almost never did. Or that you decided this wasn't worth continuing and I simply hadn't been informed yet. Neither of us spoke for a moment. I didn't know that's where your mind went, I said finally. I should have found a way to reach you. That's on me. I paused. But I need you to tell me when you're scared, Iris. Not after. Not when I manage to guess it. You have to tell me. She looked at me steadily. I don't know how to do that. I know, I said. We'll figure it out. It wasn't a dramatic resolution. Nothing was decided in one conversation. But she texted me that night, just 2 words, got home, and I understood what she was teaching herself to do, one small thing at a time. I was picking up our wedding rings when Helena Ashworth called. The name meant nothing to me. The world believed Iris had no living family. But the voice on the other end was polished, unhurried, and certain of its own significance in the way that comes from generations of unquestioned wealth. I'm Iris's mother, she said. I think it's past time we spoke. She chose a private room in one of the city's older clubs, the kind of place where history had calcified into decor. Helena Ashworth arrived looking impeccable in ivory and looked at me with the careful, analytical gaze of someone assessing a problem, not greeting a person. She had Iris's eyes. The exact shade, the exact shape. But where Iris's eyes had learned their coldness from pain, her mother's had been polished into something deliberate. I'll be direct, she said, sliding a check across the table. Take that and leave Crestwood. Leave Iris alone. I didn't look at the number. What makes you think money would work on me? Everyone has a number. Not one that's small. I pushed it back. Iris's assets start at 20 billion. Try to keep perspective. Her mouth thinned. She withdrew the check and folded her hands on the table. I don't expect you to understand. But I know my daughter. I've watched that obsessive, possessive nature build in her since she was a child. She is catastrophically unsuited to romantic love, it amplifies everything in her that is already unstable. I'm not her enemy, Mr. Mercer. I'm the only person who has ever taken that instability seriously. A pause. I came because she's gotten better lately. That frightened me. Something cold moved through my chest. She believed it. That was the worst part. Underneath the calculated delivery and the check on the table, Helena Ashworth genuinely believed she was protecting her daughter by keeping her isolated, that Iris's improvement was the danger signal, not the years of quiet destruction she'd managed alone. She had decided Iris was too broken for closeness and had spent years reinforcing that belief until Iris had started to believe it about herself too. You're the one who taught her she wasn't allowed to be loved, I said. And then you're surprised when she behaves like someone who thinks she's not allowed to be loved. I stood up. Stay away from her. I won't ask twice. I was already calling Iris before I reached the street. No answer. I called Marcus, who picked up sounding already unraveled. She's locked the office, he said. She's not responding to anything. I drove like I was running out of time, which I was. The door took 7 kicks. Inside, the office looked like the aftermath of something. Furniture displaced, a monitor on the floor. Iris was curled beneath her desk in the dress she'd worn that morning, barely conscious, her wrist wrapped in both hands. A shard of glass lay nearby. I stripped my shirt off immediately, wrapped it around her wrist, pulled her into my arms, and ran for the lift. Ambulance, I told Marcus without stopping. Now. The hospital corridor was the longest place I had ever waited in. I leaned against the wall in a blood-stained undershirt and kept seeing her face from under the desk, white, hollowed out, still murmuring stay away like an apology she'd rehearsed for years. The doctor came out and told me she was stable. I didn't trust my legs enough to move for a minute. She was awake the next morning when I came into her room. She looked at me and then immediately looked at the wall. If you won't talk to me, I said quietly, then let's call it off. The engagement. All of it. Her head snapped around. Her eyes filled instantly. I can't spend my life next to someone who's always working their way back to the edge, I said. I made myself hold her gaze and keep my voice even. Make me believe it won't happen again. Give me one reason. I don't know how to stop it. The words broke apart as she said them. She told me I was exactly what she was. That I would ruin you. That loving me was something people didn't survive. And you believed her. I moved to the edge of the bed. Iris, listen carefully. Your mother has spent your entire life teaching you that your capacity to love is a weapon and not a gift. Because that's what it became in her hands, with your father, with you. But it isn't the same. You hurt yourself before you would ever hurt me. A woman who does that is not dangerous. She's just alone, and she doesn't know yet that she doesn't have to be. I took her hand. I know what you are. I have been paying attention. And I'm telling you, you deserve this. You deserve to be here and to be loved and to stop apologizing for existing. She looked at me for a long time, her face open in a way I rarely saw it. Then she raised her free hand and pressed it carefully against my cheek, like someone testing whether something real would hold. Do you actually believe that? She asked. Without question, I said. She nodded. Slowly, then firmly. Okay, she said. Okay. Helena Ashworth found out within the week what the Mercer family name was capable of when it was motivated. I made 3 phone calls and had a comprehensive account of her financial history, her conduct toward her former husband, and several other items she would have preferred to keep private, delivered to the appropriate people in her family network. Then I visited her in person, placed a copy of the same file in front of her, and made my position clear without raising my voice. She left Crestwood and did not return. Iris's recovery was not linear. It was slow and real, which is how actual recovery works. She went back to therapy with a consistency she had apparently resisted for years. She learned to sleep through the night more often than not. She started calling me for no reason, not to report anything, not because she needed something, just to hear a familiar voice, which she would never admit was the reason but which was always obvious. We got married on a Thursday morning at the city registrar. No guests beyond our parents, no ceremony to speak of. Iris wore a simple dress the color of winter light, and when we walked out with the marriage certificate, she looked down at it the way some people look at things they spent a long time not believing they would ever hold. She tucked it carefully into her bag. Then, on what looked like an impulse she'd decided on and immediately tried to retract, she rose onto her toes and kissed my cheek, barely a touch, gone before I could react, then turned and walked several paces ahead, her ears scarlet. I stood on the pavement with my hand against my face and grinned like an idiot for longer than was probably dignified. I found the answer to the question I'd been carrying for months entirely by accident. She kept a small worn wallet in the bottom of her jewelry box. Inside was a folded piece of paper, handled so many times the creases had gone soft. A few lines in careful cursive. October 26, 2017. Raining. Behind Crestwood High School. He gave me $40 and said, "Hey, whatever it is, you'll get through it." His name is Ryan Mercer. He was the first light I ever saw. The memory returned in a rush. My senior year. A rainy Thursday. I had been cutting study hall, walking behind the school building, and found a girl in a faded uniform sobbing under an awning. I was 17 and thought mostly about myself, but something about the sight stopped me. I gave her the last cash in my pocket, said the most instinctively comforting thing that occurred to me, and walked off feeling briefly good about myself before forgetting it completely by the following morning. I had never imagined that 2 sentences in the rain could take root in someone and grow quietly for 8 years, shaping everything they chose, anchoring every climb, making sense of every sacrifice. She had built a company and a life and a $20 billion future, and underneath all of it, filed at the bottom of a jewelry box, was a scrap of paper with my name on it. I went to the bedroom. She was reading, glasses on, relaxed in the way she had slowly learned to be at home. She looked up when I came in. I sat down behind her and put my arms around her and stayed there. "I'm sorry," I said into her hair, "for taking so long to come back. And thank you for waiting. For all of it." She seemed to understand without my explaining. She set her book aside, turned, and held me back with a quiet steadiness. "You're welcome," she said simply. Epilogue, 6 years later. "Your son," Iris called from the bedroom, "has drawn on the wall. With my good lipstick." I put down my controller and went to investigate. Our 2-year-old, Noah, was standing in front of the bedroom wall regarding his own work with the satisfied expression of an artist who had no notes. Iris stood behind him with her hands on her hips, wearing the expression of a CEO who manages 700 employees and is somehow losing a battle of wills with someone who still needed help tying his shoes. I picked Noah up, kissed his head, and told Iris we'd repaint. She leveled a very specific look at me. Then she took Noah from my arms and held him with the ease of someone who has made peace with the fact that her expensive things and her beloved chaos are now permanently the same thing. The depression was largely behind her, managed, understood, not denied. It had not vanished cleanly. But it had receded to something she could navigate rather than something that navigated her. She still sometimes woke at night, pulled back by whatever echo her sleep had found. On those nights I reached for her before she was fully awake, pulled her in, told her it was a dream and that we were both here and that Noah was asleep down the hall. She would settle against my side and breathe slowly until she was back. She looked at me now over the top of Noah's head, her eyes clear and unguarded in the way they had taken years to become. "I'm glad you didn't run the second time," she said. I pulled them both close. "I'm glad I came back," I said. "To you. To this. To whatever it's supposed to be." Outside, the afternoon was warm and entirely unhurried. Inside, Noah had spotted another wall and was clearly planning something. Iris was already one step ahead of him. Everything else could wait.